Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to share with you isn't speculation. It's the reality of a system on the brink. In the next few days, silver investors around the world could witness one of the sharpest market movements we've seen in years. Not tomorrow, not next week, but literally within days. The ripple effects of global economic pressures could hit the silver market like a tidal wave. Those who are unprepared won't just miss an opportunity. They could face losses that are hard to recover from. This isn't hype. This is history unfolding in real time, and the window to act is closing fast. We are at a juncture where the dynamics of the global economy are aligning in ways that demand careful attention. When you look at the balance sheets of central banks, the levels of debt across governments, and the interconnectedness of financial markets, you begin to see that small shifts can trigger outsized consequences. History has repeatedly shown that periods of relative calm can mask structural weaknesses. The current situation is no different. Inflationary pressures are elevated in many economies, while interest rates are fluctuating in response to a complex mix of policy actions and market sentiment. These macroeconomic variables don't act in isolation. They interact in ways that amplify risk. For those invested in commodities like silver, this is not merely an academic concern. The market is signaling that volatility is likely, and the window to position oneself prudently is narrowing. Silver occupies a unique role in the financial system. It is both an industrial metal, critical for technology and manufacturing, and a store of value that investors turn to in times of uncertainty. This duality means that silver reacts to multiple pressures simultaneously. On one hand, economic slowdowns can reduce industrial demand, exerting downward pressure. On the other hand, financial instability and inflation fears can drive its price upward as investors seek tangible assets that preserve purchasing power. Understanding this balance and the risks embedded in global macro trends is essential. Investors often underestimate how quickly shifts in fiscal and monetary policy can translate into market shocks. The current environment is characterized by several compounding imbalances. Sovereign debt levels are historically high in multiple economies, creating vulnerabilities in government financing. When debt servicing costs rise, governments are forced to make difficult decisions, choices that ripple through currency markets, interest rates, and investor confidence. Meanwhile, central banks face the challenge of managing inflation without stifling growth. Their tools, while powerful, are blunt, and the timing of interventions is always imperfect. Market participants respond not just to policy itself, but to the anticipation of policy. This creates feedback loops that can accelerate market movements in unexpected directions. One of the more subtle but critical risks lies in liquidity conditions. Markets can appear stable until liquidity dries up, at which point price adjustments occur rapidly and often violently. The silver market, while smaller than gold or equities, is highly sensitive to these liquidity shifts. A sudden reallocation of capital, whether driven by policy announcements, macroeconomic reports, or shifts in investor sentiment, can trigger outsized moves. These are not hypothetical scenarios. They are patterns we have seen repeatedly throughout financial history. Ignoring them is a mistake that investors often pay dearly for. Global imbalances are also magnified by the interconnectedness of trade and finance. No economy exists in isolation, and no market moves independently. Supply chain disruptions, currency volatility, and shifts in geopolitical alignment can propagate through multiple asset classes simultaneously. Silver, positioned at the intersection of industrial demand and monetary hedging, is particularly exposed to this web of risk. Investors who fail to recognize the systemic nature of these forces are likely to find themselves reacting to events rather than anticipating them. The cost of reaction is almost always higher than the cost of preparation. Timing is crucial. Historical analysis shows that major market adjustments do not occur gradually. They happen when pressure points reach a critical threshold. Investors who understand macro imbalances can position themselves ahead of these inflection points. Those who do not are often caught in the middle of a sudden repricing. The challenge is not merely predicting direction, but recognizing the magnitude and speed at which these shifts can occur. This requires discipline, a clear-eyed assessment of data, and a willingness to adjust one's portfolio proactively. What makes the current moment especially critical is the convergence of multiple risk factors: elevated debt, inflationary pressures, interest rate uncertainty, and global geopolitical tensions all coincide in a way that magnifies potential shocks, silver, due to its dual role in the economy, will be disproportionately affected. Investors who remain unaware or unprepared risk exposure to rapid price swings that could have lasting consequences. Conversely, those who carefully analyze the macro environment and take strategic action are positioned to navigate volatility more safely and potentially to benefit from it. Understanding macro imbalances is not about fear. It is about clarity. It is about seeing the patterns, connecting the dots, and recognizing where vulnerabilities lie. History is instructive. Markets are rarely kind to those who ignore structural risks. Awareness, discipline, and strategic positioning are the tools that allow investors to withstand shocks rather than be overwhelmed by them. The current environment demands exactly that approach. Those who act with insight and prudence now are far more likely to emerge resilient, while those who disregard these warning signs may find themselves on the wrong side of a rapidly shifting market. In the next few days, the convergence of these macro factors could create conditions that the silver market has not experienced for years. This is not a matter of speculation. It is the natural outcome of imbalances that have been building over time. Investors must be mindful, deliberate, and prepared. The ability to understand and respond to macroeconomic signals separates those who protect their wealth from those who are caught unprepared when shocks arrive. It is a lesson as old as financial markets themselves, and it remains as relevant today as ever. Silver is not merely a commodity. It occupies a distinctive and multifaceted position in the global financial system. Unlike many assets, it is valued both for its industrial utility and for its role as a store of value. This duality gives it a complexity that demands careful attention, especially during periods of economic and financial stress. Industrial demand alone accounts for a significant portion of silver consumption. It is critical in manufacturing, electronics, renewable energy technologies, and medical applications. This means that shifts in global economic activity, particularly in sectors like technology and energy, directly influence silver prices. A slowdown in production or disruption in supply chains can quickly ripple through the market, affecting both short-term pricing and long-term investor sentiment. At the same time, silver serves as a hedge against uncertainty, inflation, and currency devaluation. Throughout history, tangible assets have provided protection when fiat currencies lose purchasing power or when markets face heightened volatility. Silver, being both accessible and relatively liquid, has often been chosen as a tactical tool by investors looking to safeguard wealth. It is not a perfect correlation to any single economic indicator, which gives it resilience, but also complexity. Its price movements reflect an intricate interplay between real economic activity and broader market psychology. Understanding this interplay is central to positioning oneself effectively. The strategic importance of silver becomes particularly clear when one examines historical periods of economic disruption. During times of inflationary pressure, monetary easing, or geopolitical uncertainty, silver often experiences price acceleration, sometimes independent of other commodities. This reflects the market's perception of silver as both a protective asset and a medium of preservation. It is crucial to recognize that these movements are not random. They are driven by investor behavior, macroeconomic conditions, and systemic risks that are interconnected across multiple markets. A well-informed investor studies these patterns not to predict perfectly, but to anticipate probabilities and manage exposure intelligently. Unlike gold, which is predominantly a monetary and investment hedge, silver's industrial demand anchors it to real economic performance. This anchoring creates both opportunity and risk. When industrial growth accelerates, demand for silver rises, supporting its price. However, in a recession or slowdown, industrial demand can collapse, placing downward pressure on prices. At the same time, the same forces that drive investment demand, uncertainty, inflation expectations, and financial instability may push prices upward. This duality makes silver a unique barometer of both economic health and financial sentiment. Investors must recognize that silver's value is not dictated by a single factor, but by the intersection of multiple forces acting simultaneously. Global supply dynamics further emphasize silver's strategic role. Unlike some commodities, silver production is concentrated in a few countries and is often a byproduct of mining other metals. This concentration exposes it to geopolitical risks, regulatory changes, and operational disruptions. Even small changes in production or supply chain interruptions can create significant volatility. The market responds swiftly to perceived scarcity or abundance, magnifying the impact of macroeconomic events. For investors, understanding these supply constraints is as important as monitoring demand trends. Without this perspective, one may misjudge both the timing and scale of market movements. Liquidity considerations add another layer of strategic significance. Silver is relatively liquid compared to many industrial commodities, allowing investors to enter and exit positions efficiently. However, during periods of stress, liquidity can tighten, causing exaggerated price swings. These swings are not inherently predictable, but they are highly relevant for risk management. Investors who maintain awareness of liquidity conditions can better navigate short-term volatility while keeping sight of long-term objectives. Strategic positioning in silver requires balancing liquidity needs with exposure to potential gains and losses. The intersection of these factors, industrial demand, monetary hedging, supply constraints, and liquidity dynamics underscores why silver must be treated strategically rather than as a speculative play. It is a tool for managing uncertainty, a signal of economic shifts, and a hedge against systemic risks. Investors who approach silver with discipline and foresight are able to leverage its unique characteristics to preserve wealth and capture opportunities. Those who fail to appreciate its dual nature risk exposure to unexpected volatility, particularly during periods of macroeconomic stress. Timing and preparation are critical. Silver does not react solely to immediate news. It responds to the accumulation of trends, expectations, and structural imbalances. Investors who understand its strategic role can anticipate these shifts and make decisions that are grounded in analysis rather than reaction. They recognize that price movements are the result of broader systemic forces, and they align their approach accordingly. This perspective is essential for navigating not just the next few days, but months and years ahead. Ultimately, silver's strategic role lies in its ability to bridge multiple aspects of the financial ecosystem. It connects industrial growth with monetary stability, tangible assets with investor sentiment, and local economic conditions with global market dynamics. Its complexity is what makes it valuable, but also what makes it dangerous for those who underestimate it. Successful investors do not treat silver as a single-purpose asset. They recognize it as a dynamic instrument that reflects the interplay of real-world forces. By doing so, they position themselves to withstand shocks, capitalize on opportunities, and maintain resilience when uncertainty strikes. The market is rarely kind to those who ignore these realities. Understanding silver's strategic role is not about chasing short-term gains. It is about anticipating how the world works, identifying vulnerabilities, and acting with discipline. Those who approach it thoughtfully can navigate uncertainty with confidence. Those who do not risk being swept aside by the very forces that silver, when properly understood, can help them hedge against. In a world of complex and interconnected risks, recognizing silver's unique role is not optional. It is essential in financial markets. Timing is often as critical as the decision itself. Understanding when to act, when to wait, and when to adjust exposure is central to preserving wealth and capturing opportunity. This is particularly true for silver, a market that is sensitive to both industrial cycles and investor sentiment. The complexity of silver's role means that timing is not just about predicting price movements. It is about anticipating how macroeconomic pressures, policy decisions, and market psychology converge to create windows of opportunity or risk. Investors who underestimate the importance of timing often find themselves caught off guard, paying a steep price for delayed action. The current environment underscores the urgency of timing awareness. Global economies are under stress from a combination of inflationary pressures, rising debt, and shifts in monetary policy. These forces interact in ways that amplify volatility. Markets respond not only to the immediate data, but also to expectations of future conditions. Silver, due to its dual nature as both an industrial commodity and a store of value, reacts sharply when expectations shift. A seemingly minor policy announcement, an economic report, or a geopolitical event can trigger outsized market responses. Recognizing these signals early and interpreting them correctly is essential for positioning oneself effectively. Risk awareness is inseparable from timing. One cannot manage one without understanding the other. Markets are inherently uncertain, and silver's sensitivity to multiple factors magnifies that uncertainty. Investors must ask themselves not only what could happen, but also how likely it is and what the impact would be on their portfolios. This involves analyzing both micro-level factors such as supply disruptions or demand changes, and macro-level factors such as interest rates, inflation, and global trade imbalances. Proper risk assessment allows investors to act decisively, not reactively, which is the difference between surviving market shocks and being overwhelmed by them. A key aspect of timing is understanding that market movements often accelerate after pressure points reach a tipping stage. The markets are rarely gradual in adjusting to imbalances. Small changes accumulate until the system can no longer absorb them, and when that threshold is crossed, prices move rapidly and often unpredictably. This is particularly true in silver, where liquidity can fluctuate and speculative flows can exacerbate price swings. Investors who are attuned to these accumulations can position themselves in advance, reducing the risk of being caught on the wrong side of a sudden adjustment. Another important consideration is the interaction between risk awareness and scenario planning. Investors must envision multiple outcomes and prepare for each. This is not about predicting the future with certainty. It is about recognizing probabilities and structuring positions accordingly. A disciplined investor evaluates potential scenarios, including adverse ones, and determines how much exposure is appropriate in each case. This strategic approach transforms uncertainty from a threat into a manageable component of decision-making. Silver, with its exposure to industrial, monetary, and speculative factors, demands such multidimensional preparation. Timing is also influenced by the flow of information and market perception. In modern markets, information travels instantly, and the speed at which investors react can amplify volatility. Silver markets, while not as large as equities or bonds, are still subject to rapid sentiment shifts. Observing these shifts, understanding their drivers, and acting before the broader market overreacts is a hallmark of effective timing. It requires discipline, patience, and a clear understanding of both short-term catalysts and long-term trends. Investors who chase moves without this context often enter at the worst possible moments, whereas those who align their timing with systemic understanding can take advantage of favorable conditions. Risk awareness also extends to portfolio construction. The degree of exposure to silver should reflect both market conditions and individual risk tolerance. Overconcentration in a single asset, especially in a market as volatile as silver, can magnify losses when shocks occur. Diversification, hedging strategies, and liquidity management are all tools that allow investors to navigate uncertainty while maintaining flexibility. The goal is not to eliminate risk. Risk cannot be eliminated, but to manage it intelligently so that it aligns with one's broader investment objectives. Psychological factors play a crucial role in both timing and risk awareness. Emotional reactions to market swings, fear of missing out, or the pressure of short-term performance can cloud judgment. Effective investors recognize these psychological pitfalls and implement frameworks that enforce disciplined decision-making. This means having predefined rules for entry and exit, maintaining clarity on acceptable loss thresholds, and continuously reassessing assumptions as conditions evolve. Silver, given its sensitivity to macro and micro factors, particularly benefits from such structured decision-making. Ultimately, timing and risk awareness are intertwined in the pursuit of resilience. They require constant vigilance, analysis of the big picture, and the humility to recognize that markets are unpredictable. Investors who cultivate these capabilities are not seeking to predict every movement. They are preparing to navigate volatility intelligently, respond strategically to emerging conditions, and preserve their wealth under a variety of scenarios. The ability to act decisively at the right moment while managing risk prudently distinguishes those who endure market shocks from those who are swept aside. In the context of silver today, the convergence of economic pressures, supply-demand dynamics, and market psychology creates a narrow window in which positioning matters more than usual. Investors who understand timing and risk are the ones who will be able to respond effectively, mitigating potential losses and capturing opportunities as the market adjusts. Those who ignore the signals risk exposure to rapid price movements that can occur in a matter of days. Timing and risk awareness are not abstract concepts. They are the practical tools that allow one to navigate a complex and uncertain environment with confidence, discipline, and strategic foresight. In navigating complex markets, preparation is not optional, it is essential. Investors often underestimate the importance of systematically planning for uncertainty, assuming that past trends will continue without disruption. History, however, teaches a different lesson. Markets are dynamic, often nonlinear and prone to sudden shocks. This is especially true for silver, which is influenced by industrial demand, monetary flows, and investor psychology simultaneously. Prudence and preparation begins with acknowledging that risks exist, understanding their nature, and structuring investments in a way that can withstand a wide range of outcomes. Diversification is a core principle in managing uncertainty. It is not merely about holding multiple assets. It is about holding assets that respond differently to various economic and market conditions. Silver, for example, interacts with multiple market forces. While it can act as a hedge during inflationary periods, it is also subject to industrial demand cycles. By combining silver with other assets such as equities, bonds, or alternative commodities, investors can reduce the probability of catastrophic losses while maintaining exposure to potential gains. Diversification is about creating a portfolio that is resilient to shocks rather than one that maximizes return in any single scenario. Strategic allocation requires understanding both systemic and idiosyncratic risks. Systemic risks such as macroeconomic imbalances, currency fluctuations, or geopolitical tensions affect all assets to some degree. Idiosyncratic risks, on the other hand, are specific to individual commodities or companies. Silver is unique in that it is subject to both types. A slowdown in industrial production may reduce demand, while global monetary instability can simultaneously drive investment demand upward. The prudent investor anticipates these dual pressures, ensuring that positions are balanced and that exposure does not exceed tolerable thresholds. Preparedness also involves maintaining liquidity. Markets can move quickly, and even well-reasoned investment theses can be disrupted by sudden shifts in policy, sentiment, or supply. Having assets that can be mobilized when opportunities arise or converted to reduce risk is essential. Silver is relatively liquid, but during periods of extreme volatility, liquidity can tighten unexpectedly. Prepared investors recognize this and plan for contingencies, ensuring that they can respond without being forced into panic decisions. Scenario planning is another critical element of preparation. It is not sufficient to consider a single outcome or to assume that markets will move in predictable ways. Effective investors construct multiple plausible scenarios and assess the potential impact on their portfolios. Under each, they evaluate both positive and negative outcomes, identifying strategies to mitigate losses and to take advantage of opportunities. This approach allows investors to remain flexible and resilient rather than being locked into rigid assumptions that may quickly become obsolete. Discipline in execution is as important as planning itself. A diversified portfolio without adherence to strategy can become vulnerable if decisions are driven by short-term emotions or reactions to market noise. Silver investors, in particular, must resist the temptation to chase price movements without a clear rationale. By sticking to a disciplined framework, monitoring positions relative to risk tolerance, and adjusting exposure thoughtfully, investors maintain control in volatile environments. Preparation is not passive, it is active, requiring continuous attention, analysis, and adjustment. The importance of understanding correlations cannot be overstated. Assets that appear diversified on the surface may, under stress, move together, amplifying losses. Silver, with its dual role as an industrial commodity and a store of value, can correlate with both equities and monetary metals depending on the prevailing macro conditions. Recognizing these potential correlations allows investors to structure portfolios that are truly resilient, avoiding false comfort that can arise from superficial diversification. Psychological readiness is equally important. Markets can be stressful, especially when sudden shocks occur. Investors who are mentally prepared, who have clear rules for risk management, and who accept that volatility is a natural feature of markets are better equipped to make rational decisions under pressure. Silver, being subject to rapid price swings, tests both the intellectual and emotional discipline of investors. The combination of strategic diversification, risk awareness, and psychological preparedness creates a robust framework for navigating uncertainty. Long-term resilience also depends on continuous learning and adaptation. Market conditions evolve, economic policies shift, and technological changes alter demand patterns. Silver is influenced by trends in renewable energy, electronics, and industrial production, all of which can change rapidly. Prepared investors monitor these developments closely, updating assumptions and adjusting strategies as necessary. Diversification is not a static solution. It is a dynamic approach that evolves in response to real-world conditions. Finally, the combination of diversification and preparedness is about maintaining optionality, the ability to respond, adapt, and capitalize on changes without being exposed to disproportionate risk. Investors who structure their portfolios thoughtfully, who anticipate a range of scenarios, and who maintain discipline are positioned not merely to survive market disruptions, but to navigate them advantageously. In uncertain times, prudence is not about avoiding risk entirely. It is about managing risk intelligently with a clear understanding of both potential losses and potential gains. Silver investors, in particular, face a convergence of macro pressures, supply dynamics, and market psychology that makes preparation urgent. The careful construction of a diversified, flexible portfolio, combined with disciplined execution and scenario planning, is the most reliable way to maintain resilience. History demonstrates that those who ignore preparation are often the most vulnerable when shocks arrive. Those who embrace prudence, discipline, and diversification are better positioned to endure uncertainty and to seize opportunities when others are paralyzed. In short, prudent diversification and preparedness are not optional luxuries. They are essential strategies for navigating markets that are complex, interconnected, and often unpredictable. They provide a foundation upon which investors can build both resilience and opportunity, turning uncertainty into an advantage rather than a threat. Silver, given its unique characteristics, demands nothing less than this level of strategic rigor. In times like these, hesitation is costly. The silver market doesn't wait, and neither do the forces that drive it: rising inflation, interest rate swings, and global imbalances. What you do in the next few days could define your financial resilience for months, even years. History has shown that the markets can shock us when we least expect it, and those who understand, prepare, and act strategically are the ones who endure. If you ignore this warning, the market will not forgive. If you prepare wisely, you may not just survive, you may come out stronger than ever.